Hi everyone, Michael Rubenfeld here. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am a Jew from North America who has moved to Poland, and now I live here, and on this channel I talk about my experiences living here. And today I've decided to do something a little bit different. About a year ago, I sat down with a very good friend of mine named Jonathan Garfinkel. Jonathan and I have known each other for many years, and we originally met because I was performing in a play of his in Toronto. I was in my early 20s, so we've known each other for over 20 years. Jonathan is a playwright. He's also a novelist. His newest book, In a Land Without Dogs, The Cats Learn to Bark, was released just this year in both Canada and in Germany. It's an excellent book. I encourage you to read it. You can get it on Amazon, I think. And Jonathan has had a very long relationship with Poland. He fell in love with Poland over 20 years ago, and he's been coming here much, much longer than I have. And our relationship, in a way, actually started to become closer when I started to come to Poland and also fell in love with Poland. So we decided to sit down and have a conversation about our relationship to Poland as Jews who both grew up in Canada, who now spend a lot of time in Poland. We both grew up as Zionists and went to Hebrew school and were told negative things about Poland and had those relationships change once we started to come here. And it's a bit different because it's the first time that I'm sharing an interview on here. And it's a longer form. So the interview itself is about 45 minutes. And I thought it might be interesting for you to see a couple of Jews sitting around and talking. Also, Jonathan and I have been in a kind of long-term relationship to a piece of theater that we've been trying to make called Strangers. And in this video, we'll talk a bit about that piece of theater. We're still hoping to be able to make it. We're looking for a theater who will welcome us to do it. And we do talk a little bit about that project in this video, but I think ultimately the content might be something that interests you because it's us talking about Poland, what it means for us. Remember to like and subscribe if you like content like this, and let me know what you think about the interview, please. And if you'd like to see more long-form interviews like this, because there's no shortage of people that I could be having conversations with and sharing both in Poland and around the world. But you tell me what you think. So thanks a lot, and enjoy this video with me and my good friend Jonathan Garfinkel.
Raz, dwa, trzy i.
Hey.
Hey,
Nice to see you.
nice to see you too.
So we're working on a show called Strangers. The idea behind this show. Well, why don't you talk about the idea behind this show?
The idea started at your wedding, actually.
Oh yeah.
I think we were talking about our relationship to Poland and what it's done for us as people, as individuals, and as Jews, and our relationship to Judaism. And I remember we got excited about the idea of just driving around the country and talking to people.
Right.
And sort of really taking the time to explore what this place means to us.
Yeah, and we've been friends for a long time, but I felt like our relationship deepened once I started to spend time in Poland, and then I moved here. And it was really never a part of our relationship until I kind of caught the bug.
Well, it's funny because I've been coming here since the late '90s, and I think I always felt a bit lonely in that relationship because, as somebody who's from Canada, North America, there weren't a lot of people to talk about with it. So when you committed in a way that I never did, but you moved here and you've got a family here. But for me, it's also shaped my life as a writer in really important ways.
Yeah, and I think what's important is that I committed more than you did, which is kind of the definition of our relationship. I'm far more committed than you.
I think that's true, except for a couple of things.
No, I actually think you're more successful than I am. as an artist, which is what this is really about. It's an intervention to. No, I'm just joking. No, but I mean, what it was really cool actually that we could connect about Poland. I didn't actually know that you were lonely in it. You never.
Well, I mean, for example, other than my aunt, nobody in my family gives a shit about this place.
Really?
And so, and I remember when I first came here in the late 90s, and I wanted to tell my grandmother, she was still alive at this point, and I went back to visit her village. And my mother told me, don't tell your grandmother you're coming.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, why? She's like, she hates this place.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother used to say that she wouldn't come to Poland even if you paid her $1 million.
And, you know, so my aunt became interested in sort of our roots and heritage, and she went on a few tours through Western Ukraine where the shtetls are now. And then I kind of, I wouldn't say I dragged my father here, but I got him to come because he started asking me questions one day for the first time about the history of our family. And when I say I felt lonely in it, it's more of like a kind of value or something, a curiosity of in history that for me started at a family level. But I always wondered why. I always found it odd that my parents and my brothers just didn't really care about it so much. So, you know, I found other people who were interested in that kind of stuff, like you.
I think in general, though, it's a common trait amongst Jewish families with roots here, this not caring. And I think it's something. I actually think it's something to do with the trauma of the Holocaust.
Of course.
That I think that, you know, for our grandparents forced the memory of this place down, and so our parents weren't ever asked to consider this place valuable. They weren't ever asked to care about Poland, which is why, you know, it was the same in my family. My parent family, they didn't care about Poland either.
I think it's even more than not caring. I think it's actually they were afraid. You know, I think they were taught to fear it, also for good reasons. And because, like you said, there was a deep trauma here, and it wasn't just the Holocaust. It was the economic and social circumstances that led up to that time period. And so a lot of the positive got kind of forgotten or lost in that mix. And I think what struck me when I got here 22 years ago was not, I came as a writer interested in writing about the past. I came in writing and trying to connect to the past. I felt it was something important to do. I think what surprised me was the vitality of the present. And that really excited me. Like, I met really exciting, interesting artists here, Jewish and Polish Catholic, and the culture felt incredibly rich to me.
Yeah, particularly the curiosity, the interest in you know, Judaism in Jewish culture. I was really surprised by that.
And the knowledge that Polish people had of it. I mean, especially in the artistic world. So, you know, I've told you about my friendship and relationship to Krzysztof Warlikowski and his little cohort at the Teatr Nowy in Warsaw. I met them when I met them, they were still based in Krakow, living on Grodzka Street. And their work, they had a really controversial production of Hamlet at the time at the Royce-Metoishi Theater. And I remember sitting with the set designer. She had brought out that famous book of that Polish photographer who had gone and taken pictures of all the Polish wooden synagogues pre-war. And we were sitting there flipping through these pictures of the old synagogues, and they were moving, they were mind-blowing, they were just incredible structures. And I said, you know, that's very cool, you know, why do you have this? And she said, well, in making the set of Hamlet, I wanted to echo the ghosts of the past. So she took barn boards from the countryside and actually drew some of the symbology of those synagogues onto the barn boards that when I saw the play, you couldn't actually even see them. It was so because they were like in shadow.
Right.
But for her, it was like trying to evoke this idea of ghosts and the past. and like how it kind of infiltrates the world of Hamlet. I mean, it's all about ghosts. So
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I would say that I've seen a lot of theater now in Poland, and I would say at least 50% of the time there is some kind of Jewish thematic woven into the narrative of the work that artists are doing here. And that's really interesting, the amount of energy that artists... Of course, Warlikowski, who, for those who might not know, is one of the most famous theater directors in Europe. Yeah. And every play he does, I think, has something to do with Jews at this point. It's almost become like a Warlikowski cliche. It's like, right, he's going to be working on Jews again, which is fascinating.
Well, I mean, I remember because I met him when his career was just taking off. He was quite young. He must have been about 34 at the time, and I asked because he had read all kinds of literature, Jewish literature that I had read some of it, but not all of it. He introduced me to Bruno Schulz at the time, and I said to him,
"Really? I thought he was dead at that point."
Schulz? No, sorry, not the He was killed by the Gestapo. Thank you. That was funny. So I mean, I was like, "How do you know all this stuff? And why do you know all this stuff?" And he said, "This is part of the world that we live in, that here in Poland. So they felt steeped in it. They were reading Isaac Bashevis Singer, and Kafka and Schulz and." Yiddish poets I'd never heard of, and they were introducing me to all. I mean, that's what was ironic about it. I had come as, I thought, a very well-educated Jewish. I'd done lots of Jewish education, but these Polish artists were teaching me what it meant to be Jewish.
Wow, that's interesting. And so we're making a show called Strangers together, and one of the reasons we're doing that is because we were interested in this mutual love that we've got for this country. It's more than love. I think it's a romance, really.
A Polish romance.
A Polish romance, a Polish-Jewish romance.
The tradition of poetry, for example, and romantic literature is very strong. And what's going on politically is also going on at the same time. I think we felt an obligation, like maybe a moral obligation, or just a curiosity to maybe understand that better.
I mean, I think what's interesting is we had different stakes,
right,
in a way, because I had moved here already,
that is true.
And my wife was pregnant, and I actually had to think about, okay, so I certainly fell in love with Krakow as you did. You walk through the streets of Krakow, and there are 7 still standing remaining synagogues. The architecture is clearly Jewish. You could feel that Jews were living here, undoubtedly. And that was actually something that I was surprised by, growing up in Canada, trying to hold on to the value of what Jewish culture is, while being surrounded by a kind of generic, certainly in my world, suburban reality. I couldn't feel my history, but
That's
coming here, you step onto the streets of Krakow, and 30 seconds, you're like, oh my God, right.
No, I mean, I always felt more Jewish here in that sense. I mean, probably similar to you growing up in Winnipeg. The Jewish suburban thing didn't mean much to me. But coming here, the stakes were very different, right?
Yeah, really, really different.
When you walk into a synagogue and you become the 10th member of a minyan or something, or you recite a prayer you've done many times.
Yeah, I did a lot of crying in synagogues here while doing prayers, actually.
Absolutely. And I think it's just a general deepening and trying to understand what this world really is and where it's going. I mean, I think those undercurrents have always been here of what we're experiencing now politically in Poland. Maybe it's not anything that new. But that being said, your perspective is different. I get it. It's intensified and it's just magnified by deciding to live here, deciding to have a family here.
Yeah. What does that pull for us to this country? Every time you're here, you're living in Berlin right now, because you're fancy now. You're living in Berlin. But I can feel that you have that pull here. What do you? Can you talk a little bit about that? Actually?
Coming back, or
yeah.
What
do you think the pull is? What's happening?
I mean, it's a feeling, and it sounds funny to talk about it as a feeling, but it's also it's a deepening relationship. I mean, it is a relationship of 20 plus years, but I think when I think about, I was quite serious when I came. I was young. I was like 26 years old when I came here the first time. I had a feeling that this was an important place for me as a writer, and that was tied to my Jewish identity. But that's all I knew, and that instinct was right, but it was of course different than the way I imagined it. It's hard to really explain what these pulls are. I mean, sometimes it's the ghosts, sometimes it's the people that you meet and the connections that you make. I mean, I've met extraordinary people here in Poland over the years, from abroad and from Poland itself. I've fallen in love with the Polish poets. There's such an amazing tradition here in Krakow in the poets, and I read them, I studied them, I listened to them. When I'm sitting out, here on the river or going for a walk through some of the amazing parks, there is a special feeling of almost a camaraderie with the past and present that I don't feel anywhere else. I don't know really how to describe that without sounding a little wacky or sentimental.
No, there is something around how nostalgia operates in this country. It's an incredibly nostalgic place, and it's not just nostalgic for Jews; it's nostalgic for Poles. So much about Polish culture revolves around the nostalgia for some kind of period that I feel Poland's trying to recapture.
Yes.
And when you come here as a Jew, there's something kind of similar. We're trying to recapture a version of what we were.
I think there are great stories everywhere. I just think that if the story has a personal stake in it, for you as the writer or the creator or whatever it is you want to do with those stories, then you're just that much more interested, and you have that much more of a connection. And the Polish story is one I just feel very connected to.
And I think that's also. I liked what you just said around if you have a personal connection to it, because I think that's one of the things that's complicated about growing up in Canada, where we don't really have much personal connection to Canada, to its history. Not that there isn't an important history in Canada, but I think that given that our histories are here in this part of the world, I think where how nostalgia operates and how these feelings of personal connection are triggered here, or even personal identity politics for me.
Yep.
I think about myself in a different way when I'm here than I do in Canada. It's far less generic for me while I'm here.
And when I think of going to the synagogue for the first time, in the 90s, or even when we do a Shabbat now in 2021, sometimes it feels like an act of social resistance or some sort of social activism that I do not. You don't feel in a place like North America, because the danger is different. There is the danger is almost hidden. It's quite a comfortable life, and maybe it's the discomfort that keeps it interesting. And it's not about some kind of thrill game, but it's about feeling like what you're doing actually is relevant and important.
Right.
Like what you're doing with Central is important public work. It's a gesture towards a community that is continuously evolving and emerging and wants to be part of the contemporary dialogue. I think that's exciting, and that's why I'm really excited to be here and be part of that, and in some way. I think it's hard for people who haven't been here to understand that, but I think that kind of art and activism and what that can do with a community is really interesting. And the way I think Polish people look at Judaism, people sort of in the more artistic and in university environments, I know there's a curiosity, like Warlikowski had.
But in a way, what's even more important is to work together to define what Jewish culture wants to be in a Polish context in the future. And that feels really exciting because, when I think about this place, when we think about this place, we often think it's just a graveyard, or people can think that it's a graveyard or it's a place where there used to be Jewish culture. Jewish culture no longer exists. But in fact, what's really remarkable about Poland is that Jewish culture really wants to exist again here. And it's not just Jews who want it to exist. Polish people really want Jewish culture to exist. The problem is that there's not a ton of Jews.
Right.
There used to be 3 million Jews. Now there's around 10,000, according to the census. There's nowhere in the world where Jewish culture is as important to a civilization outside of Israel, which is mostly Jews, but this is a country that's mostly non-Jews, but the importance of Jewish culture in this country is unlike anywhere else in the world. It's a kind of mind-blowing, because I think that people are starting to hook into the fact that there wasn't a separation between Jewish culture and Polish culture. Jewish culture and Polish culture were intertwined. We were taught that it wasn't, but it was actually intertwined. And what's happening now is that Polish people are starting to think about the fact that there's an absence in their histories, and that absence is 3 million people. That's a lot of people. And so Polish people are asking themselves, who are we without this part of ourselves? And I think that's why people like Warlikowski is making so much work about it, and it's why the Jewish Culture Festival is so popular. It's crazy. It's like 95% non-Jews who go, but people are hungry for it. But there aren't a lot of Jews, actual Jews, contributing to that conversation, which is what's so great about being here and going, oh my God, we are so needed. What we're doing is so required in this country because people want it.
No, the curiosity is genuine and deep. Yeah.
So you're living in Berlin now.
That's right.
Which is funny because in Strangers actually we have an argument because we started it 2 years ago, and I argued, and you said something like, "Well, I don't live in Germany or Poland."
That's right.
And then now you live in Germany.
I'm back in Berlin.
You're back in Berlin. You bought a flat there.
Yeah, over 10 years ago. Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing for a Jew to have done 10 years ago.
True.
I'm going to buy a flat in Germany.
Germany, yeah.
And now you live there. You've moved from beautiful Edmonton.
That's right.
to Berlin. And we've been talking a little bit about that. What it's like to be living in Germany, to be a Jew in Germany. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that experience. And not only that, you've got a new book coming out.
That's right.
In German, a translation of your English book about Israel, Ambivalence.
That's right. Well, that's been an interesting experience. The whole German thing has been an interesting experience. I mean, I've got a relationship that goes back to similar time periods as my relationship with Poland began. I find it more difficult in Germany as a Jewish person, oddly enough, even though there are way more Jews and there's lots of Jewish cultural stuff happening. There's something about I find challenging in Germany. I don't feel as at home there, oddly enough, as I do in Poland. German culture is tough. It's intense. And it's not as, it doesn't laugh as much as the one in Poland does somehow. I mean, I know Poles are serious, but I mean, I guess I feel a different kind of joy in Poland. This is my own personal take on this all, of course. But anyhow, Ambivalence has been an interesting journey because it was originally bought by the major publisher of Germany, Luchterhand, over 10 years ago, which is Random House. They paid for translation. They gave me money for it. Eventually, the editor left the publishing house, and they dropped the book, and it sort of sat in a desk for many years, so to speak, and has now just come out this past fall with Mandelbaum Verlag out of Vienna. They did a beautiful job with the book, and it's been interesting. What I've noticed that is different, though, between now and 10 years ago is that the dialogue in Germany around Israel and Jews have changed quite a bit. They're starting to be a little more critical of Israel, for example. But I think what I find challenging in Germany is that their relationship to what we call strangers or the other in our play is very complicated. And I feel that very strongly as somebody who comes from a very multicultural city like Toronto. And I know Poland has their own issues around that, but there's something about being a Jew in Germany that feels, there's just so many layers of complexity. And you know, for me as a Jew in Germany, there's always this question of how you're representing yourself as a Jew in light of the Holocaust. Whereas in Poland, for me, it's a bit like, yes, there's like a 1,000+ year history here of living and coexistence. So I think there's a bit of a different freight, so to speak, around that. But you know, the reception around ambivalence has been very in Germany has been positive so far. People find it very interesting. I think for them, they like that a Jewish person can be a bit more outspoken about Israel because they feel like they aren't quite entitled to say the things that I say. So I would say it's a fraught relationship that I have. I mean, Berlin is also one of the coolest cities in the world. It's very international. You know, there's a lot of Jewish people doing interesting things there. There's a strong klezmer scene. But I feel a bit more of a distance there, if that makes sense.
I think so. Although, I mean, I would just sort of challenge you in saying that you also kind of, when you come to Poland, it's on like it's for a short period of time.
True, yes.
You haven't actually settled down here. You haven't been here long term, and so there's still a romance that you've got.
That is true.
When you're here. I mean, one of the things that I find kind of tricky about Poland is that, and I do this to myself, also, but I never not feel like a Jew here, which is interesting. But in fact, I almost feel like my survival in this country depends on how I position myself as a Jew. Living in Canada, I don't feel like I need to, be a capital J Jew as much as I do here. Part of it is because of language, because I think the language here is so complicated. It's difficult to sometimes navigate professional life, particularly within the context of art. But there are periods where I just want to not be a Jew for a little while, and it's harder. I find it harder to do here.
That's
when I'm in Berlin, I just feel like I'm in Berlin. Let's party. Whereas here, I feel like I'm in Poland. Let's be Jewish.
That's true. There's more. You can kind of assimilate more in a sense.
Which is interesting because before the war, that was actually one of the goals of a lot of Jews.
They wanted to become German.
They wanted to become German, and they wanted to assimilate too. Yeah, if you were
my great aunt, I had a great aunt from Warsaw who married a Berlin Jew, and that was considered quite a step up back in the 1920s. You move to Berlin, you become part of the Berlin cultural establishment, and you leave behind your Polish Yiddishkeit, and I think maybe I can see how that was part of the ethos back then.
Are you worried at all about how Germans might feel about ambivalence?
In terms of what?
Well,
exactly?
the book. I would say that if I read, walking away from that book, your questions about Israel, you don't walk away thinking, this is a guy who's really into Israel. That you walk away going, this is a guy who used to be really into Israel. And then he started going and he started to learn more and walked away with some really, deep questions about the problems of that country.
Sure.
And now it's coming out in German, or it's come out in German. And it's going to position you quite specifically in that country. And I know you're looking for a Polish translator here to hopefully get it here. And this country is particularly, Israel loving.
Yes.
So yeah, maybe talk a bit about that.
I'm less worried about my opinions being known than about them being used in negative or kind of manipulative ways. So, I mean, I personally, well, you've read the book. I mean, Ambivalence doesn't pull any punches in terms of being critical of Israel. Of course, it comes from a place of curiosity, compassion, and wanting to understand things better, and to kind of unravel the stories I've been told as a child about it, and the myths that we grow up with, and all that. What I don't like is when, in particular, people on the far left want to use certain ideas from that, and without looking at the greater complexity of it.
Have you encountered that? People trying to use some of the ideas from your book to back up their argument?
I have a couple of times, yeah. And, of course, usually you're being accused of something that you don't, accused of being an anti-Semite or an anti-Zionist or something like that. I've had those.
Are you an anti-Zionist?
I have complicated feelings around Zionism. I understand and believe in its historical importance, but I think that there needs to be an evolution in terms of the way we look at Israel today.
Do you think in 2 minutes or less we can solve the problems in Israel?
I can't. And that was the other thing that also makes me crazy about the book, is that people like to ask me how to solve it. I mean, I have I have some opinions, of course, but the point of the book was actually to not try and find the solution, but to kind of break apart the questions.
I don't know, because I saw your play House of Many Tongues, and I feel like your play did propose a solution.
That's true.
Yeah, which was, why don't you tell everyone what your idea of the solution was?
Well, it's a kind of de-romanticized coexistence. It's like the idea that the Jews and the Arabs, the Israelis and the Palestinians have to live together, one way or another. They can hate each other, they might spit at each other or swear at each other or ignore each other. What has to stop is the killing and the kind of, militant side of it all, So a kind of peaceful coexistence is what I see as, that's what we all want in a sense, right? So, but how do you get there? I'm not going to put that out on camera right now. That's a much longer conversation. We can do that another episode. I'll tell you, Ambivalence was a very important book for me to write. It got me lots of attention, and it set my career off on a different level. But it was also sometimes a thankless task to take on that subject, and a lot of grief, a lot of hate mail, a lot of people angry over the years.
Really? Hate mail?
Oh yeah, yeah. Wow. Even in Canada.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Hate email.
Well,
I never got any letters.
What this country actually needs to do, which is to initiate a more robust, complex mourning process. Which is why there's that interesting tension between the Varlakovskys of the world, who I think is trying to contribute to that mourning process. I actually think that that's why there's Jews everywhere in people's work, whether they're conscious of it or not. They're trying to mourn. They're trying to mourn.
So, in light of that, I wanted to actually bring this back to Strangers, our project, which we began 3 years ago, I think it was, or something like that, 2 or 3 years ago. And
even longer.
Yeah. So, for me, it was really exciting to be able to talk. We talked to a really diverse, I felt, quite a diverse group of people. We used a kind of documentary style approach to doing it. It's very autobiographical about both of our relationships in life. But we started it some years ago. I'm curious if you could just talk a bit about our process and how we did that, and also where we're at now in Poland, and if you think what we're doing is contributing to this mourning process you're talking about, or where this all fits in to what you were just saying.
I mean, I think that the mourning process needs to include Jewish people in this country, and that's a really, really important part of what we're doing here. I think that one of the problems when I go to see a Varlakovsky piece, as much as I like him as a director, it feels like actual Jews are still absent from that process. A lot of places are run by non-Jews. These are good people doing a really good job running these organizations, But there are Jews here again, and they need to be included in the process for it to actually be effective. And so that's really where I think what we're doing is effective. We're Jews with roots here who are going, we want to be included in this process with you. We're coming back. We're here. And we're happy with certain aspects of this country, but you need us.
So, I mean, I'm curious because you just had a movie you were in just came out this weekend.
Yes.
And how did it feel being in that narrative, or how did that feel being immersed in that? I mean, do you see that as part of this mourning process? This kind of.
Yeah, the whole thing is very strange. To be perfectly frank, I'm in Wesele.
Yes.
Or Wesele 2, Wesele 2, by Wojtek Smarzowski, who is one of Poland's most famous filmmakers. His last movie was called Clare, or Clergy, which was looking at the Catholic Church. And this is looking at the implication of the implication of Polish people in the murder of Jewish people. It's basically looking at the Jedwabne story and asking, who are we now as Polish people? What have we become as a result of our history? And it's an interesting film. It is a very interesting film. The number of Jews who were involved in making it were pretty minimal. And I could feel that when I was on set, in a way. And I don't know how I feel about that, actually. I don't know if that's okay or not. I just know that when I was on set, for example, people were still doing weird things like saying shalom to me. Because they knew I was Jewish. And I was on set, and I was just like, we don't do that.
Did they give you a lucky Jew?
No, they didn't. I mean, they were trying to be kind of respectful.
No, I get it. They are being respectful.
But there was also something, I was still sort of like, this is a movie about Poles trying to reconcile themselves, what they've done and who they are. But it is still quite absent of Jewish people within the process, which is interesting. Mikołaj Czaska, who made the music for it, and I have had some conversations about that. Mikołaj he's a pretty famous composer, and he's been a really close collaborator with Wojtek. And Mikołaj is Jewish, and we've talked about how even he could feel the absence of Jewishness within the context of the making of the film, and even in the film itself, which is again not a bad thing, because what Wojtek has done by making this film is going to contribute and instigate a really important conversation in this country. But I also don't feel like it's about me or for me.
Right.
Because it doesn't really include Jewish people.
But better this is being done,
Absolutely.
Than nothing. Right?
Absolutely. I think it's amazing that the film is being made. Has been made.
Interesting, because I was actually at the Jedwabne Memorial in 2001. Because that 2000 is when Jan Gross's book came out, Neighbors. And then the 60th anniversary of the Jedwabne massacre happened. I went there, and wow, that kind of speaks to some of the things they're talking about. There were a lot of people there. They had a cantor there. I think he was from Jerusalem, who was there at the site of the massacre, along with people from the Catholic Church in Poland. There were speeches from different politicians. Someone from Israel was there also speaking. There were a lot of people there. There weren't a lot of Jews like myself who had made the kind of pilgrimage to this site, though I was stopped by a group of Lubavitch men. They asked if I'm a Jew. I say yes.
Right.
They pulled me.
Did they just look at your nose and they were like, oh, that guy's clearly.
I don't know what I was doing. I was probably crying or dancing.
By yourself?
And they pulled me aside into this little square, and they wrapped me in tefillin, and they handed me the prayer book, and they said, "No, do the Kaddish." And I was like,
but wait, did they ask you, or did they just sort of?
At this point, I think once I said I was a Jew, it was too late. I was doing the Kaddish. I was doing the mourner's Kaddish. It was game over. So,
right.
And you know what? I'd come to Jedwabne to be part of the mourning process. And just to go back to what I was talking about, what drew me to Poland from a writer's standpoint, was trying to write about that simultaneous feeling of mourning and living in the present, and that feeling in Jedwabne was evocative of that, and even with our travels for strangers, which some Bociani came out of, is that impulse to try and write about that feeling, that intersection of past and present.
This work that I'm making with a director named
Right.
Marcin Wierzchowski, which is that, which is very much kind of in response to what we were talking about with Wesele, where it feels like there's this absence of Jews. And Marcin and I, we've been having long-form conversations about each other's experiences, really. Marcin's experience as a Pole, who's been very much thinking about what his responsibility is as a Polish person in relationship to Jewish history and to Polish history, and also mine, him not knowing anything about my experience or the
Right.
post-war Jewish experience and vice versa. And so we decided that we were going to make a piece together that right now is called Altaheim, which means old home in Yiddish, and I guess in German as well.
Too, yeah.
But Orthodox Jews call this part of the world the Altaheim, like back in the Altaheim. And then in brackets, we're calling it Stary Dom, which means old home in Polish. And it's a piece about trying to represent both the Jewish and the Polish experience within the same context. And I think that is really the greatest absence in Poland right now, where there are Jews working on some Jewish experience. There's not a lot. There's some Jews. There's more non-Jews working on Jewish memory and on Jewish stuff, but there's very few long-form partnerships, long-form conversations between Jews and non-Jews around this part of the world.
And I just remembered, again, going with you to Gach, the village of my grandfather, and being sort of so moved by what was not there and what had been there, but also how banal it was, and how, there was that shitty bar we went into and drank vodka, and, you know, and it was like everybody looked like they were kind of falling asleep at their tables, and then when we relayed this to Yannick from Teatr Kana in Szczecin, and his suggestion was, Jonathan, go back there, stand there for 3 days, and don't move. I just love that idea.
Well, I like the idea, though. I still think we should
do. I would love
think we
to do
should do
it.
it.
Yeah.
We'll give you a chair, because you might get tired after 3 days, and a translator.
A translator would be good.
Yeah.
And I mean, that speaks also, of course, to our next stage in writing Strangers, where we're at now. So I'm very excited about that 3 years later.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, for me, so much of it is this feeling of being in a place filled with where this juxtaposition between the present and the past exists in a kind of interesting tension and dynamic, where the ghosts of so much despair and suffering are everywhere, but the uplift of the present is a kind of act of defiance that I find incredibly moving and incredibly important, because it's a kind of honoring of those ghosts and their presence, but also acknowledging that we are continuing to live. Thanks so much for having me. It's been great to talk to you.
It's been our honor.